LaGuardia was once branded a third world airport. JFK's terminals were so outdated that passengers shuffled between buildings like pieces in a maze. O'Hare, once the busiest on Earth, became notorious for delays. But now a massive transformation is underway. An $8 billion rebuild has already given LaGuardia a brand new 1.35 million square foot Terminal B. JFK is in the middle of a $19 billion overhaul, with a new 2.7 million square foot Terminal 1 rising. Chicago's O'Hare is pushing an $8.5 billion expansion, anchored by a global terminal designed to unite domestic and international flights under one roof. These are among the most ambitious airport projects in U.S. history. The question is, what did it take to rebuild three of America's busiest airports while millions of passengers still pass through them every day? The decline of American airports didn't happen overnight. Back in the 1960s and 70s, New York and Chicago built terminals for a very different time, when there were fewer passengers, smaller planes, and less demand from around the world. But what happens when decades pass and travel keeps growing? Planes got bigger, flights stretched longer, and international traffic soared, yet the airports stayed stuck in the past. By the 2000s, people had had enough. LaGuardia became the poster child for everything wrong with flying in America. The sharpest criticism came in 2014 when Vice President Joe Biden said that if you were blindfolded and dropped inside LaGuardia, you'd think you had landed in a third world country. That comment hurt, but it wasn't wrong. For millions of travelers each year, the airport meant crowded gates, peeling walls, and jammed-up hallways. And what about JFK? Instead of one smooth hub, it was a messy mix of old and new. Terminals built for Pan Am and TWA in the 1960s sat next to newer halls, but the result was far from world-class. Passengers shuffled onto buses to get between outdated buildings, connections dragged on in bottlenecks, and the dim, aging interiors made this global gateway feel more like a relic of the past. Chicago's O'Hare told a similar story. Once it was the busiest airport in the world, but soon it became known for something else: delays. Its crisscrossing runways and old terminals just couldn't keep up with the rush of modern air travel. By the 1990s, O'Hare ranked among the worst for flight delays. Passengers faced the same problem year after year. And the world was watching. While countries in Asia and the Middle East built bright glass terminals with fast train links, America's airports kept slipping down the global rankings. For a nation that gave birth to modern aviation, it was an embarrassing fall. But pressure has a way of forcing change. By the mid-2010s, a new wave of giant projects was launched. Politicians promised something bold, not just renovations, but complete reinventions. And the challenge? To rebuild these airports while still keeping them open. It was one of the toughest construction tasks in the country. LaGuardia would rise first, JFK would follow, and O'Hare would fight to win back its place as a true global hub. The stage was set. America was finally ready to rebuild its gateways to the world. But the real story wasn't just about the decision to rebuild. It was about how. And the first chapter of this reinvention? LaGuardia. LaGuardia was never built to carry the weight it eventually faced. When it first opened in 1939, it was squeezed between Flushing Bay and the Grand Central Parkway, leaving almost no room for expansion. For decades, this tight footprint shaped its future. Terminals aged without meaningful upgrades, even as passenger numbers grew year after year. By the 2010s, the strain was overwhelming. Crowded gates, dim corridors, and peeling walls weren't just inconveniences. They became symbols of a system falling behind. Then came the turning point. In 2014, Vice President Joe Biden compared LaGuardia to a third world airport. The comments stung, but it also sparked change. In 2015, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey announced an ambitious plan, not just to renovate, but to completely rebuild the airport's central facilities while keeping it open and operational. Few believed it could be done. The price tag? $8 billion was staggering, and the engineering challenge even more so. At the heart of this transformation was the new Terminal B. Spanning 1.35 million square feet, it was designed to replace the outdated structures of the 1960s. Opened in phases and completed in 2022, it brought 35 gates under soaring ceilings and glass walls filled with light. Passengers now encounter open concourses, efficient check-ins, and sweeping views of the bay instead of cramped, aging halls. Delta joined the push, taking on its own full-scale rebuild of Terminal C, finishing the airport's modernization from end to end. What made LaGuardia's rebuild especially unique was how it was accomplished. With no spare land available, engineers had to think differently. They adopted an island and bridge design, constructing new facilities on elevated platforms while keeping existing terminals in operation below. Travelers crossed pedestrian bridges suspended above active taxiways, while planes moved underneath, an innovation never before attempted at this scale in the United States. Construction crews worked within inches of live runways, essentially rebuilding a city while people still lived and moved through it every day. Beyond its striking design, Terminal B introduced improvements that reshaped the passenger experience. The arrival and departure halls were unified into one building, replacing the disjointed layout that had once forced passengers to zigzag between cramped spaces. Roadways were redesigned to ease traffic jams that plagued the airport for decades. Inside, modern security checkpoints, spacious waiting areas, and a curated mix of retail and dining shifted the airport from a place of stress into a place of comfort. The project also stood out for its financing. LaGuardia became one of the largest public-private partnerships in U.S. aviation history, with private partners helping to fund, design, build, and operate portions of the new facilities. This model became a blueprint of how other American airports might handle future overhauls without relying solely on public funds. The result is an airport reborn, where travelers once endured dark halls and endless bottlenecks. They now step into wide, light-filled spaces that rival some of the world's best mid-size hubs. LaGuardia is no longer a national punchline. It's a case study in how to modernize a modern airport without ever shutting it down. But if LaGuardia was the first success, it was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. John F. Kennedy International Airport, America's busiest global gateway, and a test of whether the U.S. could compete with the world's elite hubs. John F. Kennedy International Airport has always been more than just runways and planes. Opened in 1948 as Idlewild, it stood as a symbol of New York, the front door to America. It had icons like Pan Am's Worldport, TWA's wing-shaped terminal, and airline-specific buildings that made it look futuristic in the jet age. But what happened when the shine wore off? By the 2000s, the glamour was gone. Most of the terminals were stuck in the past, built in the 1960s and 70s for far fewer travelers. As international flights grew, the airport's layout turned into a real headache. Terminals were scattered, connections meant long walks or shuttles, and the interiors felt old and worn down. How could one of the busiest airports in the world keep up like this? By 2019, the answer was clear. It couldn't. That's when the Port Authority stepped in with the largest redevelopment in JFK's history, a $19 billion rebuild. At its core is the new Terminal 1. Spanning 2.7 million square feet, it will house 23 international gates, including 4 that can handle the world's largest aircraft, the Airbus A380. That's huge, but when will travelers see it? Construction began in 2022, with the first phase set to open in 2026 and full completion by 2030. And that's not all. A new Terminal 6 will add another 1.2 million square feet and 12 gates. Linked directly to JetBlue's Terminal 5, it will create a smooth hub for both domestic and international passengers. Together, these projects will replace JFK's most outdated halls. No more bottlenecks, no more dark waiting rooms, just light-filled open spaces designed for today's flyers. But here's the twist. Even while construction goes on, JFK is still North America's busiest international gateway. Over 90 airlines fly from here, with connections to every continent. So what's this rebuild really about? It's not just comfort, it's about keeping up with the world. Airports in Singapore, Doha, and Dubai already lead the world with efficiency and design. JFK's transformation is America's answer, a chance to take back its spot on the world stage. And New York isn't alone in this race. In Chicago, the reinvention of O'Hare is rewriting history yet again. Chicago's O'Hare is legendary. Born during World War II as a Douglas aircraft plant, it grew into the world's busiest airport from 1963 through 1998. Its design broke new ground with jet bridges, direct highway access, and underground fueling. For years, it stood as the symbol of modern air travel. But what happens when success brings its own problems? By the 1990s, O'Hare's crisscrossing runways caused endless delays, turning it into a nightmare for passengers. The fix came with the O'Hare Modernization Plan, which reworked the runways into a parallel system. That helped, but even after it was finished in 2020, the terminals still felt old and worn out. So, what's the next step? Enter O'Hare 21, an $8.5 billion plan to reinvent the airport once again. At the heart of it is the new O'Hare Global Terminal, built to replace the aging Terminal 2. Twice as big, this new hall will finally bring domestic and international flights under one roof. For the first time, United and American can connect smoothly with their partner airlines. And what does that mean for travelers? Faster connections, fewer headaches, and a hub that can finally live up to its name. O'Hare is not just upgrading, it's taking back its place as the global crossroads it was always meant to be. 2 new satellite concourses are also on the way, with the first set to open in 2028. Terminal 5 has already grown bigger, adding 10 wide-body gates in 2023 and boosting capacity by 25%. And who's paying for all this? Not the taxpayers. The airlines themselves are funding the entire program, while creating 22,000 jobs along the way. But here's the key point. O'Hare's reinvention isn't only about getting bigger, it's about becoming faster and smoother. With 8 runways, nonstop flights to 249 destinations, and more connections than any other U.S. airport, it already stands as America's busiest crossroads. The difference now is that O'Hare is building the tools that keep that crown for decades to come. In the end, 3 airports, LaGuardia, JFK, and O'Hare, come together to tell one story. America's airport era isn't over. It's being written all over again. America's airports are no longer stuck in the past. They're racing toward the future. From LaGuardia's rebirth to JFK's mega hub and O'Hare's reinvention, these projects mark a new chapter in aviation history. But the question remains, will they truly rival the world's greatest gateways? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do these upgrades finally put U.S. airports back on top? Share your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more.